webinar on creating videos with PowerPoint on Tuesday, the 4th of May, 2021 at 1900 UTC. We will not be doing a roll call as this is a webinar. However, attendance will be taken from the Zoom room as well as the audio bridge. We do have Spanish and French interpretation on today's call. Our French interpreters are Claudia and David, and our French interpreters are Ariel and Jacques. We have received 2 apologies from Priyatosh Jaina and Alberto Soto. From staff, we have Evan Ertoju, Heidi Ulrich, and myself, Claudia Reese, on call management. And before we begin, I would like to remind everyone to please state their name before speaking for the transcription purposes, and to please keep your microphones muted when not speaking to prevent any background noise. Thank you very much. And with this, I turn the call over to you, Jonathan.
Hi, my name is Jonathan Zook, and I am the co-vice chair of the ALAC and the co-chair of the CPWG, which is the Consolidated Policy Working Group inside ALAC. And so this is a little bit of a deviation from my normal activities within the at-large community. But increasingly, the at-large has become involved in creating its own promotional and educational resources. So sometimes these are like little micro websites. Sometimes these are just graphics that are shared via social media. But there's an increasing recognition of the relative value of creating video, both for education and for promotion. And I, as my day job, I'm actually involved in creating a lot of videos using traditional tools such as Adobe Premiere and Adobe After Effects for motion graphics. But I've made it a habit inside of the my large activities to do all of this work inside of PowerPoint, because it turns out that PowerPoint is a very powerful graphical design tool, and you can create videos within PowerPoint in a fairly straightforward way, in a much easier way than using traditional tools. It's the ultimate version of the 80-20 rule, where you can get 80% of the benefit with 20% of the effort. And so I have been, over the past couple of years, everything I've created, from an educational video about geonames to promotional videos for ICANN meetings, etc., I've done them all in PowerPoint, and I've made them all available in PowerPoint form so that people can look at them and play with them, make modifications to them, do translations of them, etc., just in PowerPoint, and then they can regenerate the video. So by definition, this is just an introduction to this, the potential that PowerPoint has for video creation. But once you get an understanding of the fundamentals of how you go about creating a video in PowerPoint, then the rest is just up to your imagination. And that's where I know many of you will shine far beyond me, because we have many creative people within the at-large. And so I'm hoping by sharing the mechanics of creating a video that your imaginations will then set you free to create creations well beyond the ones that I've done thus far. So I'm going to turn off my camera for now, even though I tell everybody to leave it on all the time, and we're going to focus on these screens since we're doing a software presentation. But I wanted to say hello, and I'll come back on when there's questions or something like that. Thanks. So if you think about PowerPoint, here's a typical horrible PowerPoint, as you are frequently able to see inside of ICANN presentations. It's a title slide, a summary of the bullets, and then the bullets with a bunch of text, right? And so these are the kinds of videos that we are used to looking at. So it's just a way to kind of start from where we often start. So if I wanted to just create a video out of this presentation, the first thing I would do is go to the File menu And from the and this is in the Windows version. I will show the Mac version as well, but I'll be focused primarily on the Windows version. I go to the File menu, I choose Export, and then within the Export menu, I have an option to create video, and then you can see that I have the option to create a 4K video, a high def video, a medium definition, 720p, or even a standard video. And depending on where I'm targeting it, that'll allow for easier transfer of the internet, etc. So I can choose the type that I want. And then what I can do is say, these are the number of seconds I want to spend on each slide. So if I've just created a video and done nothing else, created a PowerPoint and done nothing else, there are no timings currently associated with the slides. And so this is saying, if there are slides for which there's no timings available, then use this timing. So I might make this a little bit smaller and say that I just want it to be a couple of seconds each or something. I hit create video. I can then choose where I want this to go. Let's say if I just put it on the desktop and call it the benefits of video. Then you'll see down here in the bottom of the screen, a percentage complete bar. And I've now created a video that I can go get on the desktop and play. And it'll just go from one frame to the other and spend the 2 seconds that I specified as the video plays. For those of you that are on a Mac, the process is very similar. So this is, for example, a video, the default video that gets created by PowerPoint if you ask it just to generate a video. If I come in here and I choose File and Export, then you'll see a slightly different screen. But basically, instead of PDF here, if I choose to say that I want to create an MP4, for example, or a .mov file, then I'll have some similar choices. In this case, I have presentation quality, internet quality, or low quality, and you'll see the resolution that gets created. So on the Mac, my top resolution is 1080p, which is 1920 by 1080, which is sort of a normal YouTube video resolution. And then the same thing here, seconds to spend on each slide that don't have a set timing, and I can make this whatever I want it to be and click export. And you'll notice again, once again, down at the bottom of the screen, that it's creating a video then from my PowerPoint. You can as well create something in Keynote. If you've ever used Keynote, and it has a very similar type of functionality. If I say File, I can choose that I want to export to movie, and I'll get a dialog box that shows the what I'm trying to do there. Let me see what it's. You see that I get a dialog box that looks like this. It's self-playing is what I would choose. I want all the slides. Go to the next slide. Go to the next build. We'll talk a little bit about a build, but it gives you a little bit finer control for this sort of automatic timing. Then you can specify again what resolution that you want it to be, 720, 1080p, or custom. In all cases, you can set a custom resolution for the video so that if you want to, for example, create a vertical video for an Instagram or Facebook story, you can do that inside of PowerPoint or Keynote as well. I know that some of you don't use either of these tools, and I'm sorry to say that these are the primary tools that I've seen that allow you to create video. PowerPoint on the Windows or Mac, or Keynote on the Mac. I looked into both Google Slides and OpenOffice as alternative platforms for creating videos, and they both have very severe limitations. In both cases, you need an add-on to generate a video, and that video isn't dynamic. In other words, if you have animations as part of your slide, they're not captured as part of that video generation process. So if you really want to create a video in either Google Slides or in OpenOffice, or you will need to use like a third-party screen capture tool to generate a video from it. But that's the basic mechanics of creating a video in PowerPoint. So if I come back to this video here, this PowerPoint, excuse me, I can also, if I want to, associate music with it. So if I get to the first slide and I go to the insert audio from my PC, I can go to downloads. Oops, I'm hoping I can go to downloads. Here we go. Here's some inspiring corporate music off of a site called Free Music Archive. And so I have this ability then to add an audio file, and then I can say that I want it to play in the background, and you'll see that it will create a couple of checkboxes that'll select them for you. If I say that I want to play it in the background. So if I say, it'll say it's going to hide during show, which means that this little play bar won't be visible, that it will start automatically, and that it will play across slides. In other words, if it's a longer piece, you'll be able to, it'll play continuously across the presentation. And if you want to, you can even do some fading in, you know, so it goes and fading out at the end, and specify the time for that. And you can trim the audio as well. So I could say that I actually want this particular clip to begin at the middle rather than So you see that it allows you to play a song over the entire video by clicking that one option that says play in the background. So that is the fundamentals of just generating a video from a PowerPoint. You create a PowerPoint, you can set what the default timings are for each slide, and then you can add music if you want to, and then just hit export as video, and you can do this in PowerPoint or Keynote, and you'll end up with a video file. Are there any questions quickly about that before we move on? Hopefully that makes sense, because that's like the bare mechanics, that any presentation you create, you can then turn it into a video through that export command. Okay. No questions. Perfect. Okay, so while there are differences between these packages, there's two concepts that exist in all three of these programs, whether it's PowerPoint on the Mac or Windows or in Keynote. And those concepts for animation are transitions and animation. So transitions are how you get from one slide to the next slide. And you've seen
see you well.
I'm sorry?
We can't see you well. You are blur.
Oh, sorry. Sometimes my camera.
Yes, it's why I am telling you that
Thanks.
you need to do something with your camera.
Yes. I'll turn it off. That's the easiest thing. So it's transitions and animations. And so transitions are how you get from one slide to another, and animations are things that you want to happen within a slide. So if you think about your PowerPoint as a metaphor for video, there's two possible ways of thinking about your slide deck and your slides. One is to think of each slide as a frame of your video, and the other is to think of each slide as a scene, and then you have little animations happening within each scene. So those are sort of the two ways to think about the metaphor of slides as you map that to video. So to give you some examples, if I wanted to treat the if I want to treat each slide as a frame of video, then I can use transitions in an interesting way. So for example, let's say that I have a tree diagram that I want to make use of and use it as a metaphor for the at-large, right? So I want to say, okay, the trunk of the tree is the ALAC, and then the branches of the trees are the various committees within the at-large in ICANN, and the leaves are the output from those committees. So budget recommendations, public comments, and advice, right? And so those become sort of the metaphor for the top of the tree. And then as part of my metaphor, I might want to say, but the foundation of the ALAC is ultimately the rallows, which are sort of the main roots of the tree, and then the ALSs that are like these subroots of the tree. So, I mean, one approach to that would be to just create a complex diagram in which I labeled everything. But as we know, if you display something too complex, people are trying to find their way through it, and as in the middle, they're missing your narration, they're missing what you're talking about. And so one thing is to break this down a little bit. So what I might do is I'm going to make the screen a little bit smaller so that I can mess around with it, right, within PowerPoint. So I'm making my slides smaller, and then I'm going to make my tree bigger. And then the other thing I might do to make my life easier is go to Format Picture and say that I want to increase the transparency so that I can see the slide below it. So I've got a picture sitting on top of a slide. I've made the slide smaller. So now you can see here that I've got half the tree showing on the slide, and the other half is below the slide, right? So what I can do then is say that I want to duplicate that. Well, the other thing I can do is now that I've done it, I can put my transparency back down. So if I duplicate the slide, Control D, then in this version of the slide, I want to show, oops. In this version of the slide, I want to move up so that where I was before becomes instead of the bottom of the slide, the top of the slide. Does that make sense? So then I now have a slide that looks like this, and a slide that looks like that. Let me turn the transparency off. And so if I just play the slides, you see I've got a slide that looks like this. And then when I click on it, it looks like that, right? But if I specify that I want to use a transition by going to the Transitions tab, and I choose Push, you'll see that what it's going to do is push the bottom slide up and push the top slide away, which will give the illusion of a contiguous image. So now when I preview the slides, I've got the top of the tree where I'm talking about the trunk, and maybe I've put something here that says ALAC, and I put CPWG and OF, B, WG, etc., social media working group, and on these branches, and then the leaves, maybe I've labeled with some outputs. And then I click on it and say, but the foundation is the roots of the tree. And then I could label these as Rallos, and then the smaller branches as ALSs, for example. So that's a way to make use of a visual metaphor, but to reveal it over time in a dynamic way, and make two images look as though they're one contiguous image that I've animated. So I haven't done anything very technical at this point, except make two images match up to each other. So just using a push transition, I can make two slides appear to be one slide. Okay. There's another type of a transition that's very cool, though, called Morph, as you can see up here as well. And what's interesting about Morph is that it will actually guess at an interesting way of getting from one slide to another. In other words, it will create an animation for you designed specifically to showcase the change in focus or the change in the arrangement of the objects on the screen. And so that's called a morph transition. So in this particular case, if I duplicate, then in this second one, again, I might turn on my format so that I can make it transparent so I can see the slide underneath, right? I can make this picture bigger than the slide and say that, for example, my first area of focus is Africa. And then I could say duplicate this slide and move this around and say that my next area of focus is Australia, for example. And I always have to remember to turn the transparency back off, just doing that as a guide. So we'll just do that here in these cases. And then I might take this first slide, duplicate it, and move it down below. And now what I'm going to do with each of these slides is set their transition to morph. And so if I'm making a presentation, for example, about how the at-large is structured or something like that, I could then have an animation that looked a little bit like this, where I start out with the world and say, but it's made up of different regions. And so the first region is the African region. The next region is the Asia Pacific region. and together they make up the world, right? Obviously, I'm making very simplistic metaphors here, but you can see that I can make a fairly dynamic presentation and therefore video, because anything I create here, I just hit export and I've created a video, right? I can make a fairly dynamic presentation just using transitions, either push transitions or this amazing morph transition that creates an animation that feels appropriate to the change in slides. And I don't have to just stick to the same objects on the screen either. In other words, if I wanted to, I could come to this one and insert a text box that said, Afralo. It's only in that one, right? So now if I come from here, I have my world map, I can actually add text as part of that transition as well. So I've done no sort of typical animation work. All I've done is create a different focus within the image. I've moved things around. And because I moved around these objects, PowerPoint kind of knows what I did with them. I made it bigger and moved it over. So it went ahead and made a smooth version of the changes that I made to that slide. So that's what I can do, the kind of thing that I can do with just transitions. Are there questions about this before I move on? Because I'm always hiding Zoom when I go into PowerPoint, so I'm not going to necessarily see when you have a question. Okay. All right, so that's a very cool feature, this morph transition, because you can animate almost anything. You can have a rocket ship and change where it is on the screen. You can talk about development by having dollar bills float across the screen, etc. As long as it existed on the screen before, it'll move smoothly to where you want it to end up on the next screen, just using the morph transition. Another thing that's used quite a bit in both promo videos and explainer videos is something called kinetic typography. And that's the idea of using text, but animating the text, animating the size of the text, etc. And often that's put to music or something, and you can you've seen videos like that, I'm sure, where it's text that's moving around the screen. Well, I can do something very similar with the morph transition here. So if I have an object here that has a text box that says ICANN in it, and then in the next one, I've moved the ICANN text box down to here, and I've added policy form, I can then preview that. And now when I click on it, it actually animates into something else. So I can do some fairly simple kinetic typography, again, just using the morph transition within PowerPoint. Okay. So that's a big sort of gross tool, if you will, and it presupposes that you're going to create a fairly simple animation as part of your presentation, that you're going to have the objects, most of the objects you want to animate already visible on the screen beforehand, because it needs to know where things were in order to create that sort of animation path. But you can accomplish quite a bit using that technique. When you want to go a step further, though, then you actually use what PowerPoint refers to as animations. So you've probably seen that I made a video. I made a video like this, and many ICANNs ago, I made a PowerPoint talking about the ICANN policy development and how the at-large fits into that ICANN policy development. So for that, I went out to Pixabay and I got a couple of free images, a train and a train station. I added a text box. So for example, here I had issue report. And so the metaphor I was trying to create was that ICANN policy development was a little bit like a train, and that there were a number of stops along that train. And so, so these different stations then represent the different places to kind of get on board the train to participate in ICANN policy development. So to make this a little bit more animated, what I did was I chose the train, I went to animations, and I chose fly in. You see right here, when I choose animations at the top, I have these options for what kind of an animation I want, and I simply chose fly in. And you'll notice that that particular version of the animation doesn't look very much like a train, but over here under effect options, here in the middle, I can say that I want it to come from the left. And now it looks a little bit more like a train coming into a station. So if I now hit the preview, the reading view, I have something that looks like this, and then when I click on it, the train appears into the slide. So that's the most basic type of animation, is to select an object within your slide and explain how you want it to enter the scene. And that's known as an entrance animation. So you can see here, right, when I choose animation, I have these choices of appear, fade, fly in, float in, split, etc. Wipe, shape, wheel, and you can choose which one works best for the metaphor that you're trying to use, right? But you'll notice there's a bunch of other animations as well. There's an emphasis animation and there's exit animations. So if I take the same train and I come up here to the top and I say I want to add an animation, I have this choice of an entrance animation, emphasis, or exit. And so I might try fly out. And once again, it doesn't make the best default choice for me, but I can come to effect options and I can say to the right. Okay, so now when I hit my reading pane to preview all this, I start with my station, train comes in, I do some talking, and then the train continues on when I click it again and exits. Okay, so there's now two animations. So if I wanted to, I could then come back over here to the slide sorter, hit Control D to duplicate. And on the second slide, I might say, PDP working group. And that's the next station on the policy train. And I'm also then what I might do to make this look a little bit more like a train ride is that on this slide, I might use, again, a transition, and I'll use a push. But instead of pushing up like we did for the tree, I'll push from the right, which looks a little bit like you've traveled along a train track. So now if I come to the first slide and go to the reading pane, I can say the first stop on the policy development train is the issue report, and it's the first opportunity to get on board and participate in defining the problem. The next stop is the PDP working group that gets formed as a result of the issue report. And this represents another opportunity to get on board, to become a volunteer on this working group is the next place to get engaged in ICANN policy development. And then I can exit again, right? So I can keep using that same set of animations now. So I could say, PDP public comment, and I can go Control D and say that this is now the board public comment. I'm being quick and sloppy here with my artwork, I apologize. And so then that's the last thing that last opportunity to be engaged in the public policy process, or is it, right? Maybe there's one last chance. So what I might do is find a picture, and I'll look for stock images, illustrations, balloon. So here's some balloons, right, that are on a string. And I could also then add a rectangle. And in this rectangle, I can write ALAC advice. And I will come back to here. I'll make that bold. I'll make that a little bit bigger. So now I have an object, which is a balloon. And I have another one, which is a rectangle. If I click them both, if I select them both, I can right click on that and say that I want to group them. So now this object is just one object, right? And if I want to, maybe I could put it at a little bit of an angle like that. So that's the last way to get involved in, is something that's unique to us, and it's not one of the train stations. It's just another opportunity we have at the end of the process to be involved, is to provide ALAC advice. And so what I might want to do then is add an animation for this. If I come to animations and I do float in, and then maybe I'm going to say that I want this to come from the top, right? Now, when I say start here at PDP public comment, I've seen the public comment. That's another chance to be involved. You know, we in the CPWG, we draft our public comments and then present them to the ALAC for submission. And then finally, when the final recommendations are approved by the GNSO Council and forwarded to the board does one more public comment in which we can also be involved. But the last thing that we can do before the board makes its final decision is come in with some ALAC advice. So I've created a final animation that's for ALAC advice. So you can see that as I can go through, this is just me creating a presentation, right? And as I go through it, I'm just animating my transitions and the objects within my slides. And so in this case, each slide becomes a little bit of a scene rather than just an individual frame in the video that we're trying to create. And let me look at Zoom again to see if there's anything, any questions that have come up. I haven't read the chat or anything, so if you have a question, raise your hand, because I won't have seen the chat. Okay. Oh, I see Eduardo, I think, made a recommendation in the chat of YouTube. Yeah, there are plenty of courses on doing animations in PowerPoint, that's for sure. They're not all subject to interpretation like this one. So as I said, this is just a way to get started thinking about it, because from there, you're really just playing with these things to see how you would like to go about using them in the future. But there are week-long courses in the thing that we're spending a few minutes on today. This is just to get your creative juices flowing, if you will. All right. Okay, so one of the things that we saw when we did this is that the train left because I had duplicated it from the previous frame, right, where I wanted the train to leave. So to remind you, my normal thing is we get to the station, the train comes in, it leaves the station, we get to the next station, the train comes in. But here, because the train is sort of done, I don't really want it to leave, but because I duplicated it from the previous slide, it still has that exit animation in it. And before the ALAC advice balloon comes down. So this is where we start to hit a wall of just these high level animations that we can use to create these videos in PowerPoint. So if I come over here to the presentation again, you'll see that there's something right up here at the top that says Animation Pane. And what you'll notice is that each of these animations is actually in this list, each of the animations. So this one here is picture 2, and you see the green, if you remember, the green was the entrance animations. The red ones were the exit animations, and then this was the entrance animation for the ALAC advice, right? And so if I don't want this exit animation to occur, I can just come in here and hit delete. So now I arrive at the station comes into view. I arrive at the station, but now because the train is done, I just want to go directly to the ALAC advice. So I do that by editing things inside of this animation pane. And what's interesting about this animation pane in Windows is that these little boxes will actually give you a sense of where things fall within the scene, if you will. So right now, they're both set to happen based on a click. So I had to click the mouse in each case to make that animation happen. But if I, for example, wanted the second animation to happen as soon as the train arrived, instead of start on click, I could say start after previous. And you'll notice here in the graphic that it shows the beginning of that animation begins at the end of the previous animation. So now if I come in here, the station appears, the train comes in, but as soon as it stops, the ALAC advice appears right away. So this is how I can begin to combine different things that I've created inside of PowerPoint. And if I wanted to, I could say instead, I want this to be with previous. So you can see that the start of that animation happens exactly with the start of the previous animation. If I preview it again, now I bring the train in, you'll see that it's actually happening at the same time. And I can always set the timing for an animation as well. So for example, up here, when I'm looking at animations, if I click on a particular animation and I say that I want it to happen after previous and I want it to take longer because it's a balloon, I could say I want this to take 3 seconds, and you'll see that this little green bar gets even longer because it's now a 3-second animation that happens after the quick arrival of the train. I play it again, I click once, the train arrives, and then this happens really slowly. So this is how I can begin to treat an individual frame within PowerPoint as a scene instead of just a frame in the animation. And I do that by using these animation effects. Okay. So right now, if I was to create a video from this, what it would do is take that thing I specified in the export here, the number of seconds to spend on each slide, it will actually apply those to each animation. So that's how much time you're going to spend before what would otherwise be a mouse click. In other words, it's going to simulate a mouse click every 5 seconds. And so I can change that number, but that's what would happen if I just created the video from here, right? And I may not want that. I may want to talk a little bit more about the PDP working group process than I do about the issue report. I might not want all of those to be the same. So the next thing that I'm trying to do is create the timings for these animations. And I can go in and do this manually. In other words, I can say that the PDP, the transition here, I can say how long I want that duration to happen. I can say I want it to happen on mouse click, or I can say I want it to happen after a certain number of seconds. So that allows me to say that I want to stay on the slide before for a number of seconds before a transition occurs. And I can go through and do that manually. And then that 5 seconds, or that whatever I choose when creating video, will only be applied where I haven't done this. If I haven't set a timing, it'll set like the default timing for that animation or that transition. But anything I set manually overrides that timing and lasts for that duration. Okay. So the other cool thing that you can do then is you can add a narration to your video as well. So I'm going to go back and I'm going to change this animation to click again. So that I have control over it. So if I want to record the slideshow, I go to the slideshow tab across the top here. Hopefully you can see my mouse waving over it. And then I can choose record slideshow. I can record from the current slide or record from the beginning. So I'm going to try to record from the beginning and give this as a little bit of a presentation. So I'm going to hit record from beginning. That's fine. I don't think I need to do that. I'm hoping it's not going to prevent me from doing this just because I've doing this class. So if you see, I can start the recording. When I start the recording, it'll start at the beginning of the slide presentation. And then as I speak and advance the slides, it will record those timings for me. So the first stop in the policy development process at ICANN is the formation of the issue report. And it's the first opportunity to get on the policy development train. Here you can answer questions and surveys that help to define the problem, and that problem definition will be used in the future to provide the structure for the policymaking activities. Next along the train tracks is the formation of a PDP working group. And it's here that you have the opportunity to volunteer to get on board and be part of developing the policy to address the issues that were brought up in the issue report. This is the longest and sort of most rigorous phase of the policy development process. So it's not for the faint of heart, and you need to be really dedicated before you jump on board. Once the PDP working group has developed some initial recommendations, they're put out to the community for public comment. And that's another opportunity for at-large volunteers to become involved in ICANN policy development, which is being involved in coming up with talking points and drafting comments for submission by the ALAC to the PDP working group. Now, once the PDP work is finished and they've submitted their final report to the board once again takes that final report and holds its own public comment period, which becomes yet again another opportunity for the at-large community to be engaged as volunteers and to formulate a public comment for the ALAC to support, to submit to the board as part of this policy. And then at the very end, if the at-large community believes that there are fundamental issues that simply weren't addressed by the PDP working group process that we want the board to consider before making its final determination, we have one final tool, which is to provide advice to the board. And here again, there's an opportunity as a volunteer to be engaged, draft advice for submission for the ALAC for ultimate submission to the board. So that is my my presentation as I've recorded it. And what you will notice is that there's now a little audio file on each slide. So on this first one, so the first stop in the policy development process at ICANN is the formation of the issue report. Is the audio associated with that slide? And now each slide has audio associated with it. And if I come here and I look at the animation, I also see that there are now timings associated with these animations. So now if I go to play this presentation, fingers crossed, next along the train tracks is the formation of a PDP working group. And it's here that you have the opportunity to volunteer to get on board and be part of developing the policy to address the issues that were brought up in the issue report. This is the longest and sort of most rigorous phase of the policy development process. So it's not for the faint of heart, and you need to be really dedicated before you jump on board. So these transitions are happening without me clicking now. They're timings that were stored as part of recording the narration associated with it. So instead of having to manually go in and create all those timings, I can create those timings as a function of the recording. and I can always start over and erase the recordings if I want to do it again. You can see I can clear the timing on the current slide, clear the timings on all slides, clear narration, etc. So I always have the option of doing each of these over again, but all of the animations that I've associated with a mouse click is now stored associated with that narration. So that if I now go in and say File, Export, Create Video, Full HD, use timings and narrations. I'm going to create a video and I'm going to put this on hopefully on the desktop so that I can find it easily. And I'll call that train and I'll hit save. And you can see down here at the bottom that it's creating the video. So while that is going to take a little longer than the silly presentation at the beginning, I will bring Zoom back up to see if you have some questions about this. So please raise your hand if you have questions, because I haven't been paying attention. Oh, Eduardo, you should be able to see the slides moving while I record this. The sound is low because it's just coming out of the speaker. I'll share my screen at the end, and then you'll hear the recorded narration along with the video. I was hoping that you would just hear it a little bit, but it was just playing back and coming over the microphone. Any other questions? So if we're lucky, nope, still going.
Well, Jonathan, it's Judith. I guess the only thing I have, of course, none of these things probably would be accessible to people with screen readers, right?
Well, so remember what you're creating here, Judith, it's a good question, is a video. And so once that video is created, you have the capacity to generate captions and things like that to make it more accessible. But the video itself is not going to be accessible in that the images have all been blended together. They no longer exist as individual items that could be annotated, right? And so more often what you're going to do is provide captions, or as you know, sometimes if you want to, when creating more sophisticated narration, you could include a description of what's going on in the screen or something like that as well. So depending on your audience, you might want to do more, but the video itself is not going to be accessible because everything has been blended into a single frame of video. I hope that makes sense. So it will all be things that you do around the video that make it more accessible. But unlike a PDF or a document or something like that, a video doesn't have innate accessibility. One exception to that is that when making a video or anything that you choose to make more accessible, it makes sense to make sure that it's sufficiently high contrast. So certainly those whose eyes are not what they would like them to be benefit from your text being high contrast with the background, or your images being that are meant to be distinguished being high contrast from each other. That's a way to make a video more accessible, but not from a screen reader standpoint, but just from a visual standpoint. So now if I come in here and I, hopefully, bear with me a second. So the first stop. Hang on a second. So I'm going to go over to, I'm now going to share screen. Oh, here it is. Sorry. I'm going to share sound, optimize for video clip, share, and then hopefully the first stop in the policy development process at ICANN is the formation of the issue report. And it's the first opportunity to get on the policy development train. Here you can answer questions and surveys about that help to define the problem, and that problem definition.
We can't hear it.
You can't hear it? Provide the structure for the policy.
Very, 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 very faint.
Oh, sorry. I thought I had done share audio with. Next along the train tracks is the formation of a PDP working group. And it's here that you have the opportunity to volunteer to get on board and be part of developing the policy to address the issues that were brought up in the issue report. This is, I mean, obviously the actual audio is not important to you because I made it up as I was going along, but which should hopefully be apparent is that there is audio and that there's animation that's going on in that video that was created when we recorded the narration. So I'm hoping that is obvious as a result of the of that demo, even if you couldn't hear it. Okay.
Yeah, that works. And then I think also that audio would then make it more accessible to people who can't see the video.
Oh, for sure. So it makes sense to have, you know, there's different types of videos you might create, right? I mean, sometimes you're going to create a just a promo video, and maybe it's not narrated. Maybe it just has text in it, and you're going to do everything with captions. This particular video would be what we would call an explainer video, right? Where you're trying to take a technical concept or something like that and explain using metaphors or something to your audience. And in that case, you very often are going to use a narration, and you have the benefit of having that narration from an accessibility standpoint as well. So again, you're going to create many different kinds of videos, and the options that are available to you to make them accessible vary based on the type of video you're trying to create. So if I now, let's see. If I share PowerPoint itself, let's see if I can find it. So, you know, when you're in PowerPoint itself, you can create these different types of videos, but I can also, if I want to, say file new presentation, I can, I don't know whether or not, maybe I need to change the share, sorry. Just trying to find the best way to, what was I trying to do? Sorry, I have so many windows open. I'm trying to find them all when I go to share things. Hang on a second. Oh, I was going to say, I don't know what I was going to say. I've forgotten now. I apologize. You can go in and you can create narrations. You can add music as we showed. I could go to this first slide, and in addition to the narration, I can add another audio file. And I'm going to play it in the background. And so I don't want to loop it. I want to play across slides. I want to start automatically. I want to set the volume to low in this case. And then if I go ahead and run this, So the first stop in the policy development process. So you can see that there's now music and the narration that are combined together in this video. And then you mess around with what you want the actual audio to be. Like I can make this one higher. Oops. I can bring the volume of that one up. And this one I can bring the audio down, for example, even further if I want to, so that I can modify like how I can make it even, the music even softer, so that when I go to play it. So the first stop in the policy development process, so that's the basic concepts that you're going to make use of when you are doing animations or trying to create videos in PowerPoint. There's so much more, and easily, as Eduardo mentioned, there are tutorials online, etc., that allow you to do specific things. But when I have a specific object, I can do all kinds of animations with it. So I have these appear animations. I have emphasis animations, so I can just make something spin or and stay in place just because I want to draw attention to it, or I can have something exit. But if I want to, I can also use motion paths. So if I was trying right, you know, on top of the words that you've seen, I can do something like that, right? So I can do fairly complex animations as well. Hopefully you're seeing that. Am I sharing the screen now? Hang on a second, sorry. Yes, okay. And so really the sky's the limit. There's any number of things that you can do inside of PowerPoint in terms of animations and timing of those animations, blending of those animations, etc. And sometimes what you want to do is as simple as revealing something, so that if you have a complex diagram, so for example, if I come out here and I just try to find a Gantt chart. So I'm going to just go ahead and delete this. Let's say that I wanted to somehow talk to this screen, right? And what happens is that people are then sort of trying to read through the image to figure out what it is that we're talking about. But with some very simple animations, so for example, if I say insert a shape and it's a square, and I say that it's this big, and I format it, and I want the fill to be white, and I want the line to be no line, right? I now have a slide that looks like that, right? And so as we've already seen, we have a couple of options for how we might go about using a tool like this. So for example, I could duplicate the slide. And in the second slide, I can show more and then say that I want the transition to be a morph. And then you'll have something like this that reveals a part of the image as you go along. Alternatively, I can, within the slide, create an animation. And here I would create a path animation, so just a line. And so this is going further down than I wanted to, but I can take and the endpoint and move it up. So now if I look at my animations and I play that animation, you can see that it, oops, I made it too far up. Hang on, sorry. By moving the little red square, I'm moving where I want that to go. So now if I play it, you can see that I'm revealing what I want to reveal, and I could do that with just a mouse click then inside of the presentation. So that allows me to reveal parts of an image at a time rather than displaying the entire image as I'm talking about it and making it confusing for people to follow along. I can do other things. So for example, if I wanted to, I could make part of the screen dark, right? And only make light the part of the screen I wanted people to focus on. You've seen that in video, at a game where they're trying to point to a particular person or something like that. I have all of those capabilities at my disposal inside of PowerPoint. So at that point, it's really just up to your imagination and what you want to do. Are there additional questions? Oh, I remember that one thing I was going to do is show you for the folks that are on Mac. If you're interested, I can show you the little bit of a difference here. On my Macintosh here, if I want to add an animation, I do the same thing. I go to animations and I see a similar interface. So first thing is my entrance animations. And then you see right here the emphasis effects and the exit effects. And then if I want to do a path animation, I have those right here in front of me on the Macintosh version. If I take this box and say that I want it to fly in like that, I get the same result. And I still need to change the effect options. That's just a little further over. I come here and I can say I want it to be from the left, right? So it's a slightly different interface, but basically the same functionality. But a big difference is the animation pane isn't quite as exciting. In other words, if I say that I want to make this one, for example, appear, or I'll make this one fly in from the right. Oops, sorry, doesn't really matter. I have these two animations. You can see that even if I went to this one, if I click on it and say that I want it to happen after previous, you can see it now has a timing associated with it, but it doesn't have that nice little squares visual that makes it look like a little timeline. So that's a little bit different, but you still have after previous, with previous, duration. So the numbers are the same on the Mac version of PowerPoint, but some of what you're looking at as far as your interface is slightly different. So instead of having those green boxes that kind of show that one animation begins after the other, it's just got this icon saying that there's a time. So after previous, with previous, right? Those are some of the other options you can do in addition to on click. And so that's basically the same functionality, exactly the same functionality, but presented slightly differently in the Mac version of PowerPoint, because I know that some of you use Macs. So I think that's what I wanted to show you, and I'm happy to answer other questions if there's something that came up in the chat. can these films be used as background video on Zoom with speaker camera also being in the visible frame? Or not films, but the slideshow? Yes, Aubrey, so what Melissa, a feature of Zoom that Melissa Allgood has started using and some others is that your virtual background can in fact be a PowerPoint presentation. But one of the limitations of that is that it's the finished slide in the background, and it just goes from one to the other just as an appear. It doesn't include any of the transitions or animations that you've created if you make it a background in Zoom. So the only way to do what you're describing is actually to use third-party software that we've talked about a little bit, and I'm sure we will again before the next ICANN meeting, which is virtual camera software. And that's what allows you to, for example, here, if I cut to my video, it could be that I'm frozen at this point. If I cut to my video, I can add a layer to it that is another part of the screen. So if I come in here and I add a desktop app window, train PowerPoint.
Are you frozen there?
I think I am, but can you still see the, you can't see me, but you can see the screen, right?
Yes.
So I've now added a PowerPoint to the screen with me. I don't know why I'm frozen, but it's just because I'm trying to do too many things, I guess. But this is virtual camera software called ManyCam. This is what allowed me to bring the MacBook Pro into this Windows presentation. But I can now add something onto the screen so that if I come in here to my train, so you can, the first stop in the, so you can see that hopefully you can see that I've now got the animation as part of my camera window. And that's done with surveys about that help to define the problem. Of course, the narration is now annoying, but so you can see that I can add a PowerPoint or anything else I want to my camera feed using let me just start a new one here. So
well, that's what we did when we split the screen, when you and Hadia did the picture, did the presentations,
yeah, so
right?
That's something else. There's a piece of software called Prezi Video that is like PowerPoint, but it just knocks out the background and lets your webcam show through the background. And so that's the software that I was using for the talking points and that Hadia used for her session. So it's very simple to use. You create a presentation in Prezi Video, and then there's no background to the presentation. The background is your video. And so that makes it even easier. It sort of has it's sort of like PowerPoint, but with a virtual camera built in. And then when I did the final presentation about the ICANN Learn courses, I used this tool because I had like finer control over the animations. But that's all done using virtual camera software because the built-in Zoom feature is static. So yeah, Aubrey,
so she used the Prezi, not ManyCam.
Yeah, so Prezi is what Hadia used, and it's what I used for the talking points. I used ManyCam for my presentation at the end where I had the train come in and leave and stuff like that because it gave me finer control over the animations. Does that make sense? Prezi is limited in it has its own kind of visual metaphor, which is kind of drilling into things, and that's its metaphor. And as long as you're happy with that for your presentation, then it's one of the easiest tools to use. And we'll do another virtual camera workshop, and we can look at Prezi Video a little bit more in depth. But that's how you accomplish that feat of mixing your camera with video. So this session is really about creating videos we're going to put up on YouTube or on the wiki or be used as part of I Can Learn or something like that. Any other questions? All right. Well, I appreciate it. What we're going to try to do is announce some kind of a contest. Look for it on the list and on Skype for people that are interested in trying to create videos prior to the next meeting, either as a promo for a session or as a explainer of a technical concept. And we haven't worked out the specifics of it, but hopefully it'll be an incentive to open up PowerPoint and start playing around with it and get involved in creating your own little videos. Even if it's just the simple kind we did at the beginning, all the way through the complicated type, depending on how involved you want to get. So I'm hoping that this will be something that is helpful to you. And Eduardo, you asked what the prize is. I think that'll be part of the that'll be part of the announcement. I don't know. Heidi is going to have to come up with the prizes, I think. So, so we're going to do a video competition, and hopefully that'll encourage you to play around with this, because that's all it really is just playing around. And then just as a reminder, there's a shared folder, and I don't know if Evan is on the or if I will be able to find this, we'll see.
Hi, Jonathan. Did you want me to share the folder?
Yeah, there's a folder called Resources.
Yes.
Okay, yeah, if we can.
See this one?
You can share that. I think I actually have it, yeah.
At large social media resources?
That's right.
Okay, I put it in the chat. Thank you.
So this is the videos, if you click on that. But if you click back on one level and you go to at-large social media resources, you'll see that, and here I can just do a quick screen share, I guess, instead of just talking about it. Hang on a second. So here's a bunch of things that are in the social media resources. There's ICANN 70 graphics, there's presentations, but here you can see under videos are some of the videos we've created, all of which were created in PowerPoint. And if you go back to a level to at-large social media resources, and you look at PowerPoint video templates, these are actually the underlying PowerPoint files that were used to create those videos. So you can sort of see you know, how they were done. So probably the most complicated one was this one. So we don't need to watch it all, but the source file for that is right here, this first one. So you can download that, you can play around with the text, etc. And that was from a webinar we did on social media best practices. So you can go in and change who the names of the speakers are and what's going to be covered, and you can use it as a template for creating your own sort of promo videos. And I'll continue that practice of creating everything that I do in PowerPoint, and then anybody can play around with the source files that get created, and hopefully everybody will soon be doing it. All right. Thanks, everyone. I appreciate your time and patience with all these open windows and things like that. I hope it was helpful, and I look forward to seeing what you guys create. Talk to you soon.
Thanks so much.
Thanks. Recording stopped.